At dawn on Saturday, March 16, 1521, we came upon a high land at a distance of 300 leagues from the islands of Latroni, an island named Zamal Samar. The following day, the Captain General desired to land on another island which was uninhabited and lay to the right of the above-mentioned island, in order to be more secure, and to get water and have some rest. He had 2 tents set up on the shore for the sick and had a sow killed for them. On Monday afternoon, March 18th, we saw a boat coming toward us with 9 men in it. Therefore, the Captain General ordered that no one should move or say a word without his permission. When those men reached the shore, their chief went immediately to the Captain General, giving signs of joy because of our arrival. 5 of the most ornately adorned of them remained with us, while the rest went to get some others who were fishing, and so they all came. The Captain General, seeing that they were reasonable men, ordered food to be set before them, and gave them red caps, mirrors, combs, bells, ivory, bocasine, and other things. When they saw the captain's courtesy, they presented fish, a jar of palm wine, which they call arak, figs more than 1 palmo long, bananas and others which were smaller and more delicate, and 2 coconuts. They had nothing else then, but made us signs with their hands that they would bring umai or rice, and coconuts, and many other articles of food within 4 days. Coconuts are the fruit of the palm tree. Just as we have bread, wine, oil, and milk, so those people get everything from that tree. They get wine in the following manner. They bore a hole into the heart of the said palm at the top called palmito, i.e., stalk, from which distills a liquor which resembles white must. That liquor is sweet but somewhat tart, and is gathered in canes of bamboo as thick as the leg and thicker. They fasten the bamboo to the tree at evening for the morning, and in the morning for the evening. That palm bears a fruit, namely, the coconut, which is as large as the head or thereabouts. Its outside husk is green and thicker than 2 fingers. Certain filaments are found in that husk, whence is made cord for binding together their boats. Under that husk there is a hard shell, much thicker than the shell of the walnut, which they burn and make therefrom a powder that is useful to them. Under that shell there is a white marrowy substance 1 finger in thickness, which they eat fresh with meat and fish as we do bread, and it has a taste resembling the almond. It could be dried and made into bread. There is a clear, sweet water in the middle of that marrowy substance which is very refreshing. When that water stands for a while after having been collected, it congeals, and becomes like an apple. When the natives wish to make oil, they take that coconut, and allow the marrowy substance and the water to putrefy. Then they boil it and it becomes oil like butter. When they wish to make vinegar, they allow only the water to putrefy, and then place it in the sun, and a vinegar results like that made from white wine. Milk can also be made from it, for we made some. We scraped that marrowy substance and then mixed the scrapings with its own water, which we strained through a cloth, and so obtained milk like goat's milk. Those palms resemble date palms, but although not smooth they are less knotty than the latter. A family of 10 persons can be supported on 2 trees, by utilizing them week about for the wine, for if they did otherwise, the trees would dry up. They last a century. Those people became very familiar with us. They told us many things, their names, and those of some of the islands that could be seen from that place. Their own island was called Zuluan, and it is not very large. We took great pleasure with them, for they were very pleasant and conversable. In order to show them greater honor, the Captain General took them to his ship and showed them all his merchandise: cloves, cinnamon, pepper, ginger, nutmeg, mace, gold, and all the things in the ship. He had some mortars fired for them, whereat they exhibited great fear, and tried to jump out of the ship. They made signs to us that the above said articles grew in that place where we were going. When they were about to retire, they took their leave very gracefully and neatly, saying that they would return according to their promise. The island where we were is called Humunu, but inasmuch as we found 2 springs there of the clearest water, we called it Aquadata Libanisania, the watering place of good signs, for there were the first signs of gold which we found in those districts. We found a great quantity of white coral there, and large trees with fruit a trifle smaller than the almond and resembling pine seeds. There are also many palms, some of them good and others bad. There are many islands in that district, and therefore we called them the archipelago of San Lazaro, as they were discovered on the Sabbath of St. Lazarus. They lie in X degrees of latitude toward the Arctic Pole, and in a longitude of 161 degrees from the line of demarcation. At noon on Friday, March 22nd, those men came as they had promised us in 2 boats with coconuts, sweet oranges, a jar of palm wine, and a cock, in order to show us that there were fowls in that district. They exhibited great signs of pleasure at seeing us. We purchased all those articles from them. Their signier was an old man who was painted tattooed. He wore 2 gold earrings in his ears, and the others many gold armlets on their arms and kerchiefs about their heads. We stayed there 1 week, and during that time our captain went ashore daily to visit the sick, and every morning gave them coconut water from his own hand, which comforted them greatly. There are people living near that island who have holes in their ears so large that they can pass their arms through them. Those people are Kafiri, that is to say, heathen. They go naked, with a cloth woven from the bark of a tree about their privies, except some of the chiefs who wear cotton cloth embroidered with silk at the ends by means of a needle. They are dark, fat, and painted. They anoint themselves with coconut and with bani seed oil, as a protection against sun and wind. They have very black hair that falls to the waist, and use daggers, knives, and spears ornamented with gold, large shields, fascines, javelins, and fishing nets that resemble risali, and their boats are like ours. On the afternoon of Holy Monday, the day of Our Lady, March 25, while we were on the point of weighing anchor, I went to the side of the ship to fish, and putting my feet upon a yard leading down into the storeroom, they slipped, for it was rainy, and consequently I fell into the sea, so that no one saw me. When I was all but under, my left hand happened to catch hold of the clew garnet of the mainsail, which was dangling ascosa in the water. I held on tightly, and began to cry out so lustily that I was rescued by the small boat. I was aided, not, I believe, indeed, through my merits, but through the mercy of that font of charity of the Virgin. That same day we shaped our course toward the west-southwest between 4 small islands, namely, Senalo, Hyunanghan, Ibusan, and Abarian. On Thursday morning, March 28, as we had seen a fire on an island the night before, we anchored near it. We saw a small boat which the natives call Bolodo with 8 men in it, approaching the flagship. A slave belonging to the Captain General, who was a native of Sumatra, which was formerly called Traprobana, spoke to them. They immediately understood him, came alongside the ship, unwilling to enter but taking a position at some little distance. 220 The captain, seeing that they would not trust us, threw them out a red cap and other things tied to a bit of wood. They received them very gladly, and went away quickly to advise their king. About 2 hours later we saw 2 balangay coming. They are large boats and are so called by those people. They were full of men, and their king was in the larger of them, being seated under an awning of mats. When the king came near the flagship, the slave spoke to him. The king understood him, for in those districts the kings know more languages than the other people. He ordered some of his men to enter the ships, but he always remained in his balangay, at some little distance from the ship until his own men returned, and as soon as they returned he departed. The captain general showed great honor to the men who entered the ship, and gave them some presents, for which the king wished before his departure to give the captain a large bar of gold and a basketful of ginger. The latter, however, thanked the king heartily but would not accept it. In the afternoon we went in the ships and anchored near the dwellings of the king. Next day, Holy Friday, the captain general sent his slave, who acted as our interpreter, ashore in a small boat to ask the king if he had any food to have it carried to the ships, and to say that they would be well satisfied with us, for he and his men had come to the island as friends and not as enemies. The king came with 6 or 8 men in the same boat and entered the ship. He embraced the captain general, to whom he gave 3 porcelain jars covered with leaves and full of raw rice, 2 very large orade, and other things. The captain general gave the king a garment of red and yellow cloth made in the Turkish fashion, and a fine red cap, and to the others, the king's men, to some knives and to others mirrors. Then the captain general had a collation spread for them, and had the king told through the slave that he desired to be kc with him, that is to say, brother. The king replied that he also wished to enter the same relations with the captain general. Then the captain showed him cloth of various colors, linen, coral ornaments, and many other articles of merchandise, and all the artillery, some of which he had discharged for him, whereat the natives were greatly frightened. Then the captain general had a man armed as a soldier, and placed him in the midst of 3 men armed with swords and daggers, who struck him on all parts of the body. Thereby was the king rendered almost speechless. The captain general told him through the slave that one of those armed men was worth 100 of his own men. The king answered that that was a fact. The captain general said that he had 200 men in each ship who were armed in that manner. He showed the king cuirasses, swords, and bucklers, and had a review made for him. Then he led the king to the deck of the ship, that is located above at the stern, and had his sea chart and compass brought. He told the king through the interpreter how he had found the strait in order to voyage thither, and how many moons he had been without seeing land, whereat the king was astonished. Lastly, he told the king that he would like, if it were pleasing to him, to send 2 of his men with him so that he might show them some of his things. The king replied that he was agreeable, and I went in company with one of the other men. When I reached shore, the king raised his hands toward the sky and then turned toward us too. We did the same toward him as did all the others. The king took me by the hand, one of his chiefs took my companion, and thus they led us under a bamboo covering, where there was a balangay, as long as 80 of my palm lengths, and resembling a fusta. We sat down upon the stern of that balangay, constantly conversing with signs. The king's men stood about us in a circle with swords, daggers, spears, and bucklers. The king had a plate of pork brought in and a large jar filled with wine. At every mouthful, we drank a cup of wine. The wine that was left in the cup at any time, although that happened but rarely, was put into a jar by itself. The king's cup was always kept covered and no one else drank from it but he and I. Before the king took the cup to drink, he raised his clasped hands toward the sky, and then toward me, and when he was about to drink, he extended the fist of his left hand toward me. At first I thought that he was about to strike me, and then drank. I did the same toward the king. They all make those signs one toward another when they drink. We ate with such ceremonies and with other signs of friendship. I ate meat on Holy Friday, for I could not help myself. Before the supper hour I gave the king many things which I had brought. I wrote down the names of many things in their language. When the king and the others saw me writing, and when I told them their words, they were all astonished. While engaged in that, the supper hour was announced. 2 large porcelain dishes were brought in, one full of rice and the other of pork with its gravy. We ate with the same signs and ceremonies, after which we went to the palace of the king, which was built like a hayloft and was thatched with fig, banana and palm leaves. It was built up high from the ground on huge posts of wood, and it was necessary to ascend to it by means of ladders. The king made us sit down there on a bamboo mat with our feet drawn up like tailors. After a half hour a platter of roast fish cut in pieces was brought in, and ginger freshly gathered, and wine. The king's eldest son, who was the prince, came over to us, whereupon the king told him to sit down near us, and he accordingly did so. Then 2 platters were brought in, one with fish and its sauce, and the other with rice, so that we might eat with the prince. My companion became intoxicated as a consequence of so much drinking and eating. They used the gum of a tree called anime wrapped in palm or fig banana leaves for lights. The king made us a sign that he was going to go to sleep. He left the prince with us, and we slept with the latter on a bamboo mat with pillows made of leaves. When day dawned the king came and took me by the hand, and in that manner we went to where we had had supper, in order to partake of refreshments, but the boat came to get us. Before we left, the king kissed our hands with great joy, and we his. One of his brothers, the king of another island, and 3 men came with us. The captain general kept him to dine with us, and gave him many things. Pieces of gold, of the size of walnuts and eggs, are found by sifting the earth in the island of that king who came to our ships. All the dishes of that king are of gold, and also some portion of his house, as we were told by that king himself. According to their customs he was very grandly decked out, molto in ordine, and the finest looking man that we saw among those people. His hair was exceedingly black, and hung to his shoulders. He had a covering of silk o' his head, and wore 2 large golden earrings fastened in his ears. He wore a cotton cloth all embroidered with silk, which covered him from the waist to the knees. At his side hung a dagger, the haft of which was somewhat long and all of gold, and its scabbard of carved wood. He had 3 spots of gold on every tooth, and his teeth appeared as if bound with gold. 238 He was perfumed with storax and benzoin. He was tawny and painted, tattooed all over. That island of his was called Butuan and Calagan. When those kings wished to see one another, they both went to hunt in that island where we were. The name of the first king is Raya Kolambu, and the second Raya Shoai. Early on the morning of Sunday, the last of March, and Easter Day, the Captain General sent the priest with some men to prepare the place where Mass was to be said, together with the interpreter, to tell the king that we were not going to land in order to dine with him, but to say Mass. Therefore the king sent us 2 swine that he had killed. When the hour for Mass arrived, we landed with about 50 men, without our body armor, but carrying our other arms, and dressed in our best clothes. Before we reached the shore with our boats, 6 pieces were discharged as a sign of peace. We landed, the 2 kings embraced the Captain General, and placed him between them. We went in marching order to the place consecrated, which was not far from the shore. Before the commencement of Mass, the captain sprinkled the entire bodies of the 2 kings with musk water. The Mass was offered up. The kings went forward to kiss the cross as we did, but they did not offer the sacrifice. When the body of our Lord was elevated, they remained on their knees and worshipped him with clasped hands. The ships fired all their artillery at once when the body of Christ was elevated, the signal having been given from the shore with muskets. After the conclusion of Mass, some of our men took communion. The Captain General arranged a fencing tournament, at which the kings were greatly pleased. Then he had a cross carried in and the nails and a crown, to which immediate reverence was made. He told the kings through the interpreter that they were the standards given to him by the emperor his sovereign, so that wherever he might go he might set up those his tokens. He said that he wished to set it up in that place for their benefit, for whenever any of our ships came, they would know that we had been there by that cross, and would do nothing to displease them or harm their property. If any of their men were captured, they would be set free immediately on that sign being shown. It was necessary to set that cross on the summit of the highest mountain, so that on seeing it every morning, they might adore it, and if they did that, neither thunder, lightning, nor storms would harm them in the least. They thanked him heartily and said that they would do everything willingly. The Captain General also had them asked whether they were Moros or heathen, or what was their belief. They replied that they worshipped nothing, but that they raised their clasped hands and their face to the sky, and that they called their God Abba. Thereat the captain was very glad, and seeing that, the first king raised his hands to the sky, and said that he wished that it were possible for him to make the captain see his love for him. The interpreter asked the king why there was so little to eat there. The latter replied that he did not live in that place except when he went hunting and to see his brother, but that he lived in another island where all his family were. The Captain General had him asked to declare whether he had any enemies, so that he might go with his ships to destroy them and to render them obedient to him. The king thanked him and said that he did indeed have 2 islands hostile to him, but that it was not then the season to go there. The captain told him that if God would again allow him to return to those districts, he would bring so many men that he would make the king's enemies subject to him by force. He said that he was about to go to dinner, and that he would return afterward to have the cross set up on the summit of the mountain. They replied that they were satisfied, and then forming in battalion and firing the muskets, and the captain having embraced the 2 kings, we took our leave. After dinner we all returned clad in our дөббets, and that afternoon went together with the 2 kings to the summit of the highest mountain there. When we reached the summit, the Captain General told them that he esteemed highly having sweated for them, for since the cross was there, it could not but be of great use to them. On asking them which port was the best to get food, They replied that there were three, namely, Ceylon, Zubu, and Calagan, but that Zubu was the largest and the one with most trade. They offered of their own accord to give us pilots to show us the way. The Captain General thanked them, and determined to go there, for so did his unhappy fate will. After the cross was erected in position, each of us repeated a Pater Noster and an Ave Maria, and adored the cross, and the kings did the same. Then we descended through their cultivated fields, and went to the place where the barangay was. The kings had some coconuts brought in so that we might refresh ourselves. The captain asked the kings for the pilots, for he intended to depart the following morning, and said that he would treat them as if they were the kings themselves, and would leave one of us as hostage. The kings replied that every hour he wished the pilots were at his command, but that night the first king changed his mind, and in the morning when we were about to depart, sent word to the Captain General, asking him for love of him to wait 2 days until he should have his rice harvested, and other trifles attended to. He asked the Captain General to send him some men to help him, so that it might be done sooner, and said that he intended to act as our pilot himself. The captain sent him some men, but the kings ate and drank so much that they slept all the day. Some said to excuse them that they were slightly sick. Our men did nothing on that day, but they worked the next 2 days. One of those people brought us about a porringer full of rice and also 8 or 10 figs bananas fastened together to barter them for a knife which at the most was worth 3 quatrini. The captain, seeing that that native cared for nothing but a knife, called him to look at other things. He put his hand in his purse and wished to give him 1 real for those things, but the native refused it. The captain showed him a ducado, but he would not accept that either. Finally the captain tried to give him a dopione worth 2 ducados, but he would take nothing but a knife, and accordingly the captain had one given to him. When one of our men went ashore for water, one of those people wanted to give him a pointed crown of massy gold, of the size of a colonna, for 6 strings of glass beads, but the captain refused to let him barter, so that the natives should learn at the very beginning that we prized our merchandise more than their gold. Those people are heathens, and go naked and painted. They wear a piece of cloth woven from a tree about their privies. They are very heavy drinkers. Their women are clad in tree cloth from their waist down, and their hair is black and reaches to the ground. They have holes pierced in their ears which are filled with gold. Those people are constantly chewing a fruit which they call abaca, and which resembles a pear. They cut that fruit into 4 parts, and then wrap it in the leaves of their tree which they call bitra, i.e., beetle. Those leaves resemble the leaves of the mulberry. They mix it with a little lime, and when they have chewed it thoroughly, they spit it out. It makes the mouth exceedingly red. All the people in those parts of the world use it, for it is very cooling to the heart, and if they cease to use it they would die. There are dogs, cats, swine, fowls, goats, rice, ginger, coconuts, figs, bananas, oranges, lemons, millet, panicum, sorgo, wax, and a quantity of gold in that island. It lies in a latitude of 9 2/3 degrees toward the Arctic Pole, and in a longitude of 162 degrees from the line of demarcation. It is 25 from the equator, and is called Mazaa. We remained there 7 days, after which we laid our course toward the northwest, passing among 5 islands, namely, Ceylon, Bohol, Canayan, Bai, and Gatayan. In the last named island of Gatayan, there are bats as large as eagles. As it was late we killed one of them, which resembled chicken in taste. There are doves, turtle doves, parrots, and certain black birds as large as domestic chickens, which have a long tail. The last mentioned birds lay eggs as large as the goose, and bury them under the sand, through the great heat of which they hatch out. When the chicks are born, they push up the sand, and come out. Those eggs are good to eat. There is a distance of 20 leguas from Mazaa to Gatayan. We set out westward from Gatayan, but the king of Mazaa could not follow us closely, and consequently, we awaited him near 3 islands, namely, Polo, Tikoban, and Pasan. When he caught up with us he was greatly astonished at the rapidity with which we sailed. The captain general had him come into his ship with several of his chiefs, at which they were pleased. Thus did we go to Zubu from Gatayan, the distance to Zubu being 15 leguas. At noon on Sunday, April 7, we entered the port of Zubu, passing by many villages, where we saw many houses built upon logs. On approaching the city, the captain general ordered the ships to fling their banners. The sails were lowered and arranged as if for battle, and all the artillery was fired, an action which caused great fear to those people. The captain sent a foster son of his as ambassador to the king of Zubo with the interpreter. When they reached the city, they found a vast crowd of people together with the king, all of whom had been frightened by the mortars. The interpreter told them that that was our custom when entering into such places, as a sign of peace and friendship, and that we had discharged all our mortars to honor the king of the village. The king and all of his men were reassured, and the king had us asked by his governor what we wanted. The interpreter replied that his master was a captain of the greatest king and prince in the world, and that he was going to discover Malacca, but that he had come solely to visit the king because of the good report which he had heard of him from the king of Mazaa, and to buy food with his merchandise. The king told him that he was welcome literally, he had come at a good time, but that it was their custom for all ships that entered their ports to pay tribute, and that it was but 4 days since a junk from Chimasayam laden with gold and slaves had paid him tribute. As proof of his statement, the king pointed out to the interpreter a merchant from Chima, who had remained to trade the gold and slaves. The interpreter told the king that, since his master was the captain of so great a king, he did not pay tribute to any signier in the world, and that if the king wished peace he would have peace, but if war instead, war. Thereupon, the Moro merchant said to the king Kataraya Chita, that is to say, "Look well, sire. These men are the same who have conquered Calicut, Malacca, and all India Major, i.e., India Major. If they are treated well, they will give good treatment, but if they are treated evil, and worse treatment, as they have done to Calicut and Malacca." The interpreter understood it all and told the king that his master's king was more powerful in men and ships than the king of Portugallo, that he was the king of Spania and emperor of all the Christians, and that if the king did not care to be his friend he would next time send so many men that they would destroy him. The Moro related everything to the king, who said thereupon that he would deliberate with his men, and would answer the captain on the following day. Then he had refreshments of many dishes, all made from meat and contained in porcelain platters, besides many jars of wine brought in. After our men had refreshed themselves, they returned and told us everything. The king of Mazaa, who was the most influential after that king and the signier of a number of islands, went ashore to speak to the king of the great courtesy of our Captain General. Monday morning, our notary, together with the interpreter, went to Zubu. The king, accompanied by his chiefs, came to the open square where he had our men sit down near him. He asked the notary whether there were more than one captain in that company, and whether that captain wished him to pay tribute to the emperor his master. The notary replied in the negative, but that the captain wished only to trade with him and with no others. The king said that he was satisfied, and that if the captain wished to become his friend, he should send him a drop of blood from his right arm, and he himself would do the same to him as a sign of the most sincere friendship. The notary answered that the captain would do it. Thereupon, the king told him that all the captains who came to that place were wont to give presents one to the other, i.e., mutual presents between the king and the captain, and asked whether our captain or he ought to commence. The interpreter told the king that since he desired to maintain the custom, he should commence, and so he did. Tuesday morning the king of Malay-Visayan came to the ships with the Moro. He saluted the Captain General in behalf of the king of Zubu, and said that the king of Zubu was collecting as much food as possible to give to him, and that after dinner he would send one of his nephews and 2 others of his chief men to make peace. The Captain General had one of his men armed with his own arms, and had the Moro told that we all fought in that manner. The Moro was greatly frightened, but the captain told him not to be frightened, for our arms were soft 143 toward our friends and harsh toward our enemies, and as handkerchiefs wipe off the sweat, so did our arms overthrow and destroy all our adversaries, and those who hate our faith. The captain did that so that the Moro, who seemed more intelligent than the others, might tell it to the king. After dinner the king's nephew, who was the prince, came to the ships with the king of Malay-Visayan, the Moro, the governor, the chief constable, and 8 chiefs, to make peace with us. The Captain General was seated in a red velvet chair, the principal men on leather chairs, and the others on mats upon the floor. The Captain General asked them through the interpreter whether it were their custom to speak in secret or in public, and whether that prince and the king of Malay-Visayan had authority to make peace. They answered that they spoke in public, and that they were empowered to make peace. The Captain General said many things concerning peace, and that he prayed God to confirm it in heaven. They said that they had never heard anyone speak such words, but that they took great pleasure in hearing them. The captain, seeing that they listened and answered willingly, began to advance arguments to induce them to accept the faith. Asking them who would succeed to the seigniory after the death of the king, he was answered that the king had no sons but only daughters, the eldest of whom was the wife of that nephew of his, who therefore was the prince. They said that when the fathers and mothers grew old, they received no further honor, but their children commanded them. The captain told them that God made the sky, the earth, the sea, and everything else, and that he had commanded us to honor our fathers and mothers, and that whoever did otherwise was condemned to eternal fire, that we are all descended from Adam and Eva, our first parents, that we have an immortal spirit, and many other things pertaining to the faith. All joyfully entreated the captain to leave them 2 men, or at least 1, to instruct them in the faith, and said that they would show them great honor. The captain replied to them that he could not leave them any men then, but that if they wished to become Christians, our priest would baptize them, and that he would next time bring priests and friars who would instruct them in our faith. They answered that they would first speak to their king, and that then they would become Christians, whereat we all wept with great joy. The Captain General told them that they should not become Christians for fear or to please us, but of their own free wills, and that he would not cause any displeasure to those who wished to live according to their own law, but that the Christians would be better regarded and treated than the others. All cried out with one voice that they were not becoming Christians through fear or to please us, but of their own free will. Then the captain told them that if they became Christians, he would leave a suit of armor, for so had his king commanded him, that we could not have intercourse with their women without committing a very great sin, since they were pagans, and that he assured them that if they became Christians, the devil would no longer appear to them except in the last moment at their death. They said that they could not answer the beautiful words of the captain, but that they placed themselves in his hands, and that he should treat them as his most faithful servants. The captain embraced them weeping, and clasping one of the prince's hands and one of the king's between his own, said to them that, by his faith in God and to his sovereign, the emperor, and by the habit which he wore, he promised them that he would give them perpetual peace with the king of Spania. They answered that they promised the same. After the conclusion of the peace, the captain had refreshments served to them. Then the prince and the king of Malay presented some baskets of rice, swine, goats, and fowls to the captain general on behalf of their king, and asked him to pardon them, for such things were but little to give to one such as he. The captain gave the prince a white cloth of the finest linen, a red cap, some strings of glass beads, and a gilded glass drinking cup. Those glasses are greatly appreciated in those districts. He did not give any present to the king of Malay, for he had already given him a robe of Cambodia, besides other articles. To the others he gave now one thing and now another. Then he sent to the king of Zubu through me and one other a yellow and violet silk robe, made in Turkish style, a fine red cap, some strings of glass beads, all in a silver dish, and 2 gilt drinking cups in our hands. When we reached the city we found the king in his palace surrounded by many people. He was seated on a palm mat on the ground, with only a cotton cloth before his privies, and a scarf embroidered with the needle about his head, a necklace of great value hanging from his neck, and 2 large gold earrings fastened in his ears set round with precious gems. He was fat and short, and tattooed with fire in various designs. From another mat on the ground he was eating turtle eggs which were in 2 porcelain dishes, and he had 4 jars full of palm wine in front of him covered with sweet-smelling herbs and arranged with 4 small reeds in each jar by means of which he drank. Having duly made reverence to him, the interpreter told the king that his master thanked him very warmly for his present, and that he sent this present not in return for his present but for the intrinsic love which he bore him. We dressed him in the robe, placed the cap on his head, and gave him the other things, then kissing the beads and putting them upon his head, I presented them to him. He doing the same, i.e., kissing them, accepted them. Then the king had us eat some of those eggs and drink through those slender reeds. The others, his men, told him in that place the words of the captain concerning peace and his exhortation to them to become Christians. The king wished to have us stay to supper with him, but we told him that we could not stay then. Having taken our leave of him, the prince took us with him to his house, where 4 young girls were playing instruments, one on a drum like ours, but resting on the ground, the second was striking 2 suspended gongs alternately with a stick wrapped somewhat thickly at the end with palm cloth, the third, 1 large gong in the same manner, and the last, 2 small gongs held in her hand, by striking one against the other, which gave forth a sweet sound. They played so harmoniously that one would believe they possessed good musical sense. Those girls were very beautiful and almost as white as our girls and as large. They were naked except for tree cloth hanging from the waist and reaching to the knees. Some were quite naked and had large holes in their ears with a small round piece of wood in the hole, which keeps the hole round and large. They have long black hair, and wear a short cloth about the head, and are always barefoot. The prince had 3 quite naked girls dance for us. We took refreshments and then went to the ships. Those gongs are made of brass metallo and are manufactured in the regions about the Sino Magno, which is called China. They are used in those regions as we use bells and are called aghan. On Wednesday morning, as one of our men had died during the previous night, the interpreter and went to ask the king where we could bury him. We found the king surrounded by many men, of whom, after the due reverence was made, I asked it. He replied, "If I and my vassals all belong to your sovereign, how much more ought the land?" I told the king that we would like to consecrate the place, and to set up a cross there. He replied that he was quite satisfied, and that he wished to adore the cross as did we. The deceased was buried in the square with as much pomp as possible, in order to furnish a good example. Then we consecrated the place, and in the evening buried another man. We carried a quantity of merchandise ashore which we stored in a house. The king took it under his care as well as 4 men who were left to trade the goods by wholesale. Those people live in accordance with justice, and have weights and measures. They love peace, ease, and quiet. They have wooden balances, the bar of which has a cord in the middle by which it is held. At one end is a bit of lead, and at the other marks like quarter libras, third libras, and libras. When they wish to weigh, they take the scales which has 3 wires like ours, and place it above the marks, and so weigh accurately. They have very large measures without any bottom. The youth play on pipes made like ours which they call subin. Their houses are constructed of wood, and are built of planks and bamboo, raised high from the ground on large logs, and one must enter them by means of ladders. They have rooms like ours, and under the house they keep their swine, goats, and fowls. Large sea snails corneali, beautiful to the sight, are found there which kill whales. For the whale swallows them alive, and when they are in the whale's body, they come out of their shells and eat the whale's heart. Those people afterward find them alive near the dead whale's heart. Those creatures have black teeth and skin and a white shell, and the flesh is good to eat. They are called lagan. On Friday we showed those people a shop full of our merchandise, at which they were very much surprised. For metals, iron, and other large merchandise they gave us gold. For the other smaller articles they gave us rice, swine, goats, and other food. Those people gave us 10 pieces of gold for 9 libras of iron, 1 piece being worth about 1½ ducats. The Captain General did not wish to take too much gold, for there would have been some sailors who would have given all that they owned for a small amount of gold, and would have spoiled the trade forever. On Saturday, as the captain had promised the king to make him a Christian on Sunday, a platform was built in the consecrated square, which was adorned with hangings and palm branches for his baptism. The Captain General sent men to tell the king not to be afraid of the pieces that would be discharged in the morning, for it was our custom to discharge them at our greatest feasts without loading with stones. On Sunday morning, April 14, 40 men of us went ashore, 2 of whom were completely armed and preceded the royal banner. When we reached land, all the artillery was fired. Those people followed us hither and thither. The captain and the king embraced. The captain told the king that the royal banner was not taken ashore except with 50 men armed as were those 2, and with 50 musketeers, but so great was his love for him that he had thus brought the banner. Then we all approached the platform joyfully. The captain and the king sat down in chairs of red and violet velvet, the chiefs on cushions, and the others on mats. The captain told the king through the interpreter that he thanked God for inspiring him to become a Christian, and that now he would more easily conquer his enemies than before. The king replied that he wished to become a Christian, but that some of his chiefs did not wish to obey, because they said that they were as good men as he. Then our captain had all the chiefs of the king called, and told them that, unless they obeyed the king as their king, he would have them killed, and would give their possessions to the king. They replied that they would obey him. The captain told the king that he was going to Spania, but that he would return again with so many forces that he would make him the greatest king of those regions, as he had been the first to express a determination to become a Christian. The king, lifting his hands to the sky, thanked the captain, and requested him to let some of his men remain with him, so that he and his people might be better instructed in the faith. The captain replied that he would leave 2 men to satisfy him, but that he would like to take 2 of the children of the chiefs with him, so that they might learn our language, who afterward on their return would be able to tell the others the wonders of Spania. A large cross was set up in the middle of the square. The captain told them that if they wished to become Christians as they had declared on the previous days, that they must burn all their idols and set up a cross in their place. They were to adore that cross daily with clasped hands, and every morning after their i.e., the Spaniards' custom, they were to make the sign of the cross, which the captain showed them how to make, and they ought to come hourly, at least in the morning, to that cross, and adore it kneeling. The intention that they had already declared, they were to confirm with good works. The king and all the others wished to confirm it thoroughly. The captain general told the king that he was clad all in white to demonstrate his sincere love toward them. They replied that they could not respond to his sweet words. The captain led the king by the hand to the platform while speaking these good words in order to baptize him. He told the king that he would call him Don Carlo, after his sovereign the emperor, the prince, Don Fernando, after the emperor's brother, the king of Mazaya, Yohani, a chief, Fernando, after our chief, that is to say, the captain, the Moro, Cristoforo, and then the others, now one name, and now another. 500 men were baptized before Mass. After the conclusion of Mass, the captain invited the king and some of the other chiefs to dinner, but they refused, accompanying us, however, to the shore. The ships discharged all the mortars, and embracing, the king and chiefs and the captain took leave of one another. After dinner the priest and some of the others went ashore to baptize the queen, who came with 40 women. We conducted her to the platform, and she was made to sit down upon a cushion, and the other women near her, until the priest should be ready. She was shown an image of Our Lady, a very beautiful wooden child Jesus, and a cross. Thereupon, she was overcome with contrition, and asked for baptism amid her tears. We named her Johanna, after the emperor's mother, her daughter, the wife of the prince, Katharina, the Queen of Mazaa, Lisabeta, and the others, each their distinctive name. Counting men, women, and children, we baptized 800 souls. The queen was young and beautiful, and was entirely covered with a white and black cloth. Her mouth and nails were very red, while on her head she wore a large hat of palm leaves in the manner of a parasol, with a crown about it of the same leaves, like the tiara of the Pope, and she never goes any place without such a one. She asked us to give her the little child Jesus to keep in place of her idols, and then she went away. In the afternoon, the king and queen, accompanied by numerous persons, came to the shore. Thereupon, the captain had many drums of fire and large mortars discharged, by which they were most highly delighted. The captain and the king called one another brothers. That king's name was Raya Humaban. Before that week had gone, all the persons of that island, and some from the other island, were baptized. We burned one hamlet which was located in a neighboring island, because it refused to obey the king or us. We set up the cross there, for those people were heathen. Had they been Moros, we would have erected a column there as a token of greater hardness, for the Moros are much harder to convert than the heathen. The Captain General went ashore daily during those days to hear Mass, and told the king many things regarding the faith. One day the queen came with great pomp to hear Mass. 3 girls preceded her with 3 of her hats in their hands. She was dressed in black and white with a large silk scarf, crossed with gold stripes thrown over her head, which covered her shoulders, and she had on her hat. A great number of women accompanied her, who were all naked and barefoot, except that they had a small covering of palm tree cloth before their privies, and a small scarf upon the head, and all with hair flowing free. The queen, having made the due reverence to the altar, seated herself on a silk embroidered cushion. Before the commencement of the Mass, the captain sprayed her and some of her women with musk rose water, for they delighted exceedingly in such perfumes. The captain, knowing that the queen was very much pleased with the child Jesus, gave it to her, telling her to keep it in place of her idols, for it was in memory of the Son of God. Thanking him heartily, she accepted it. Before Mass one day, the Captain General had the king come clad in his silk robe, and the chief men of the city, to wit, the king's brother and prince's father, whose name was Bendera, another of the king's brothers, Kateo, and certain ones called Simeot, Siboia, Sisake, Magalib, and many others whom I shall not name in order not to be tedious. The captain made them all swear to be obedient to their king, and they kissed the latter's hand. Then the captain had the king declare that he would always be obedient and faithful to the king of Spania, and the king so swore. Thereupon, the captain drew his sword before the image of Our Lady, and told the king that when anyone so swore, he should prefer to die rather than to break such an oath, if he swore by that image, by the life of the emperor his sovereign, and by his habit to be ever faithful. After the conclusion of that, the captain gave the king a red velvet chair, telling him that wherever he went he should always have it carried before him by one of his nearest relatives, and he showed him how it ought to be carried. The king responded that he would do that willingly for love of him, and he told the captain that he was making a jewel to give to him, namely, 2 large earrings of gold to fasten in his ears, 2 armlets to put on his arms, above the elbows, and 2 other rings for the feet above the ankles, besides other precious gems to adorn the ears. Those are the most beautiful ornaments which the kings of those districts can wear. They always go barefoot, and wear a cloth garment that hangs from the waist to the knees. One day the captain general asked the king and the other people why they did not burn their idols as they had promised when they became Christians, and why they sacrificed so much flesh to them. They replied that what they were doing was not for themselves, but for a sick man who had not spoken now for 4 days, so that the idols might give him health. He was the prince's brother, and the bravest and wisest man in the island. The captain told them to burn their idols and to believe in Christ, and that if the sick man were baptized, he would quickly recover, and if that did not so happen they could behead him, i.e., the captain then and there. Thereupon, the king replied that he would do it, for he truly believed in Christ. We made a procession from the square to the house of the sick man with as much pomp as possible. There we found him in such condition that he could neither speak nor move. We baptized him and his 2 wives, and ex-girls. Then the captain had him asked how he felt. He spoke immediately and said that by the grace of our Lord he felt very well. That was a most manifest miracle that happened in our times. When the captain heard him speak, he thanked God fervently. Then he made the sick man drink some almond milk, which he had already had made for him. Afterward he sent him a mattress, a pair of sheets, a coverlet of yellow cloth, and a pillow. Until he recovered his health, the captain sent him almond milk, rose water, oil of roses, and some sweet preserves. Before 5 days the sick man began to walk. He had an idol that certain old women had concealed in his house burned in the presence of the king and all the people. He had many shrines along the seashore destroyed, in which the consecrated meat was eaten. The people themselves cried out Castiglia, Castiglia, and destroyed those shrines. They said that if God would lend them life, they would burn all the idols that they could find, even if they were in the king's house. Those idols are made of wood, and are hollow, and lack the back parts. Their arms are open and their feet turned up under them with the legs open. They have a large face with 4 huge tusks like those of the wild boar, and are painted all over. There are many villages in that island. Their names, those of their inhabitants, and of their chiefs are as follows: Singapala, and its chiefs, Salatan, Sigabukan, Samaningha, Simatikot, and Sikanbul. 1. Mandai, and its chief, Apanoan, 1. Lalan, and its chief, Thitu, 1. Lalyatan, and its chief, Tupun, 1. Silamai, and 1. Lubukan. All those villages rendered obedience to us, and gave us food and tribute. Near that island of Zubu was an island called Matan, which formed the port where we were anchored. The name of its village was Matan, and its chiefs were Zula and Silapilapu. That city which we burned was in that island and was called Bula. In order that your most illustrious lordship may know the ceremonies that those people use in consecrating the swine, they first sound those large gongs. Then 3 large dishes are brought in, 2 with roses and with cakes of rice and millet, baked and wrapped in leaves, and roast fish, the other with cloth of cambaya and 2 standards made of palm tree cloth. 1 bit of cloth of cambaya is spread on the ground. Then 2 very old women come, each of whom has a bamboo trumpet in her hand. When they have stepped upon the cloth they make obeisance to the sun. Then they wrap the cloths about themselves. One of them puts a kerchief with 2 horns on her forehead, and takes another kerchief in her hands, and dancing and blowing upon her trumpet, she thereby calls out to the sun. The other takes one of the standards and dances and blows on her trumpet. They dance and call out thus for a little space, saying many things between themselves to the sun. She with the kerchief takes the other standard, and lets the kerchief drop, and both blowing on their trumpets for a long time, dance about the bound hog. She with the horns always speaks covertly to the sun, and the other answers her. A cup of wine is presented to her of the horns, and she dancing and repeating certain words, while the other answers her, and making pretense 4 or 5 times of drinking the wine, sprinkles it upon the heart of the hog. Then she immediately begins to dance again. A lance is given to the same woman. She shaking it and repeating certain words, while both of them continue to dance, and making motions 4 or 5 times of thrusting the lance through the heart of the hog, with a sudden and quick stroke, thrusts it through from one side to the other. The wound is quickly stopped with grass. The one who has killed the hog, taking in her mouth a lighted torch, which has been lighted throughout that ceremony, extinguishes it. The other one dipping the end of her trumpet in the blood of the hog, goes around marking with blood with her finger first the foreheads of their husbands, and then the others, but they never came to us. Then they divest themselves and go to eat the contents of those dishes, and they invite only women to eat with them. The hair is removed from the hog by means of fire. Thus no one but old women consecrate the flesh of the hog, and they do not eat it unless it is killed in this way. Those people go naked, wearing but one piece of palm tree cloth about their privies. The males, large and small, have their penis pierced from one side to the other near the head, with a gold or tin bolt as large as a goose quill. In both ends of the same bolt, some have what resembles a spur, with points upon the ends, others are like the head of a cart nail. I very often asked many, both old and young, to see their penis, because I could not credit it. In the middle of the bolt is a hole, through which they urinate. The bolt and the spurs always hold firm. They say that their women wish it so, and that if they did otherwise they would not have communication with them. When the men wish to have communication with their women, the latter themselves take the penis not in the regular way and commence very gently to introduce it into their vagina, with the spur on top first, and then the other part. When it is inside it takes its regular position, and thus the penis always stays inside until it gets soft, for otherwise they could not pull it out. Those people make use of that device because they are of a weak nature. They have as many wives as they wish, but one of them is the principal wife. Whenever any of our men went ashore, both by day and by night, every one invited him to eat and to drink. Their viands are half-cooked and very salty. They drink frequently and copiously from the jars through those small reeds, and one of their meals lasts for 5 or 6 hours. The women loved us very much more than their own men. They practice the following ceremonies when one of their chiefs dies. First, all the chief women of the place go to the house of the deceased. The deceased is placed in the middle of the house in a box. Ropes are placed about the box in the manner of a palisade, to which many branches of trees are attached. In the middle of each branch hangs a cotton cloth like a curtained canopy. The most principal women sit under those hangings, and are all covered with white cotton cloth, each one by a girl who fans her with a palm leaf fan. The other women sit about the room sadly. Then there is one woman who cuts off the hair of the deceased very slowly with a knife. Another, who was the principal wife of the deceased, lies down upon him, and places her mouth, her hands, and her feet upon those of the deceased. When the former is cutting off the hair, the latter weeps, and when the former finishes the cutting, the latter sings. There are many porcelain jars containing fire about the room, and myrrh, storax, and benzoin, which make a strong odor through the house, are put on the fire. They keep the body in the house for 5 or 6 days during those ceremonies. I believe that the body is anointed with camphor. Then they bury the body in the same box which is shut in a log by means of wooden nails and covered and enclosed by logs of wood. Every night about midnight in that city, a jet black bird as large as a crow was wont to come, and no sooner had it thus reached the houses than it began to screech, so that all the dogs began to howl, and that screeching and howling would last for 4 or 5 hours, but those people would never tell us the reason of it. On Friday, April 26, Zula, a chief of the island of Matan, sent one of his sons to present 2 goats to the captain general, and to say that he would send him all that he had promised, but that he had not been able to send it to him because of the other chief Silapilapua, who refused to obey the king of Spania. He requested the captain to send him only 1 boatload of men on the next night, so that they might help him and fight against the other chief. The captain general decided to go thither with 3 boatloads. We begged him repeatedly not to go, but he, like a good shepherd, refused to abandon his flock. At midnight, 60 men of us set out armed with corslets and helmets, together with the Christian king, the prince, some of the chief men, and 20 or 30 balangays. We reached Matan 3 hours before dawn. The captain did not wish to fight then, but sent a message to the natives by the Moro to the effect that if they would obey the king of Spania, recognize the Christian king as their sovereign, and pay us our tribute, he would be their friend, but that if they wished otherwise, they should wait to see how our lances wounded. 345 They replied that if we had lances they had lances of bamboo and stakes hardened with fire. They asked us not to proceed to attack them at once, but to wait until morning, so that they might have more men. They said that in order to induce us to go in search of them, for they had dug certain pit holes between the houses in order that we might fall into them. When morning came 49 of us leaped into the water up to our thighs, and walked through water for more than 2 crossbow flights before we could reach the shore. The boats could not approach nearer because of certain rocks in the water. The other 11 men remained behind to guard the boats. When we reached land, those men had formed in 3 divisions to the number of more than 1,500 persons. When they saw us, they charged down upon us with exceeding loud cries, 2 divisions on our flanks and the other on our front. When the captain saw that, he formed us into 2 divisions, and thus did we begin to fight. The musketeers and crossbowmen shot from a distance for about a half hour, but uselessly, for the shots only passed through the shields which were made of thin wood and the arms of the bearers. The captain cried to them, cease firing, but his order was not at all heeded. When the natives saw that we were shooting our muskets to no purpose, crying out they determined to stand firm, but they redoubled their shouts. When our muskets were discharged, the natives would never stand still, but leaped hither and thither, covering themselves with their shields. They shot so many arrows at us and hurled so many bamboo spears, some of them tipped with iron, at the captain general, besides pointed stakes hardened with fire, stones, and mud, that we could scarcely defend ourselves. Seeing that the captain general sent some men to burn their houses in order to terrify them. When they saw their houses burning, they were roused to greater fury. 2 of our men were killed near the houses, while we burned 20 or 30 houses. So many of them charged down upon us that they shot the captain through the right leg with a poisoned arrow. On that account, he ordered us to retire slowly, but the men took to flight, except 6 or 8 of us who remained with the captain. The natives shot only at our legs, for the latter were bare, and so many were the spears and stones that they hurled at us, that we could offer no resistance. The mortars in the boats could not aid us as they were too far away. So we continued to retire for more than a good crossbow flight from the shore, always fighting up to our knees in the water. The natives continued to pursue us, and picking up the same spear 4 or 6 times, hurled it at us again and again. Recognizing the captain, so many turned upon him that they knocked his helmet off his head twice, but he always stood firmly like a good knight, together with some others. Thus did we fight for more than 1 hour, refusing to retire farther. An Indian hurled a bamboo spear into the captain's face, but the latter immediately killed him with his lance, which he left in the Indian's body. Then, trying to lay hand on sword, he could draw it out but halfway, because he had been wounded in the arm with a bamboo spear. When the natives saw that, they all hurled themselves upon him. One of them wounded him on the left leg with a large cutlass, which resembles a scimitar, only being larger. That caused the captain to fall face downward, when immediately they rushed upon him with iron and bamboo spears and with their cutlasses, until they killed our mirror, our light, our comfort, and our true guide. When they wounded him, he turned back many times to see whether we were all in the boats. Thereupon, beholding him dead, we, wounded, retreated, as best we could, to the boats, which were already pulling off. The Christian king would have aided us, but the captain charged him before we landed, not to leave his barangay, but to stay to see how we fought. When the king learned that the captain was dead, he wept. Had it not been for that unfortunate captain, not a single one of us would have been saved in the boats, for while he was fighting the others retired to the boats. I hope through the efforts of your most illustrious lordship that the fame of so noble a captain will not become effaced in our times. Among the other virtues which he possessed, he was more constant than ever anyone else in the greatest of adversity. He endured hunger better than all the others, and more accurately than any man in the world did he understand sea charts and navigation. And that this was the truth was seen openly, for no other had had so much natural talent on Saturday, April 27, 1521. The captain desired to fight on Saturday, because it was the day especially holy to him. 8 of our men were killed with him in that battle, and 4 Indians, who had become Christians and who had come afterward to aid us, were killed by the mortars of the boats. Of the enemy, only 15 were killed, while many of us were wounded. In the afternoon the Christian king sent a message with our consent to the people of Matan, to the effect that if they would give us the captain and the other men who had been killed, we would give them as much merchandise as they wished. They answered that they would not give up such a man, as we imagined they would do, and that they would not give him for all the riches in the world, but that they intended to keep him as a memorial. On Saturday, the day on which the captain was killed, the 4 men who had remained in the city to trade, had our merchandise carried to the ships. Then we chose 2 commanders, namely, Duarte Barbosa, a Portuguese and a relative of the captain, and Juan Serrano, a Spaniard. As our interpreter, Henrik by name, was wounded slightly, he would not go ashore any more to attend to our necessary affairs, but always kept his bed. On that account, Duarte Barbosa, the commander of the flagship, cried out to him and told him, that although his master, the captain, was dead, he was not therefore free. On the contrary, he, i.e., Barbosa, would see to it that when we should reach Hispania, he should still be the slave of Dona Beatriz, the wife of the captain general. And threatening the slave that if he did go ashore, he would be flogged, the latter arose, and, feigning to take no heed to those words, went ashore to tell the Christian king that we were about to leave very soon, but that if he would follow his advice, he could gain the ships and all our merchandise. Accordingly they arranged a plot, and the slave returned to the ship, where he showed that he was more cunning than before. On Wednesday morning, the 1st of May, the Christian king sent word to the commanders that the jewels which he had promised to send to the king of Spania were ready, and that he begged them and their other companions to come to dine with him that morning, when he would give them the jewels. 24 men went ashore, among whom was our astrologer, San Martin de Civila. I could not go because I was all swollen up by a wound from a poisoned arrow which I had received in my face. Joven Carvalho and the constable returned, and told us that they saw the man who had been cured by a miracle take the priest to his house. Consequently, they had left that place, because they suspected some evil. Scarcely had they spoken those words when we heard loud cries and lamentations. We immediately weighed anchor and discharging many mortars into the houses, drew in nearer to the shore. While thus discharging our pieces we saw Juan Serrano in his shirt bound and wounded, crying to us not to fire any more, for the natives would kill him. We asked him whether all the others and the interpreter were dead. He said that they were all dead except the interpreter. He begged us earnestly to redeem him with some of the merchandise, but Juan Carvalho, his boon companion, and others would not allow the boat to go ashore so that they might remain masters of the ships. But although Juan Serrano weeping asked us not to set sail so quickly, for they would kill him, and said that he prayed God to ask his soul of Juan Carvalho, his comrade, in the day of judgment, we immediately departed. I do not know whether he is dead or alive. In that island are found dogs, cats, rice, millet, panicum, sorgo, ginger, figs, bananas, oranges, lemons, sugarcane, garlic, honey, coconuts, nankas, gourds, flesh of many kinds, palm wine, and gold. It is a large island, and has a good port with 2 entrances, one to the west and the other to the east-northeast. It lies in X degrees 365 of latitude toward the Arctic Pole, and in a longitude of 160-4 366 degrees from the line of demarcation. Its name is Zubu. We heard of Malacco there before the death of the captain general. Those people play a violin with copper strings. Words of those heathen people. For man lack. For woman payron payon. For young woman beni beni. For married woman babi. For hair boho. For face gay. For eyelids palak. For eyebrows chilii. For eye mata. For nose elan. For jaws apin. For lips olal. For mouth baba. For teeth nippin. For gums leg hex. For tongue dilla. For ears dilinan. For throat layak. For neck tanjap. For chinquilan. For beard banghad. For shoulders baga. For spine lakad. For breast dung-gan. For body tayam. Armpit ilat. For arm bachan. For elbow siko. For pulse malanghai. For hand kamat. For the palm of the hand palan. For finger dudlo. For fingernail coco. For navel pusud. For penis yudin. For testicles bato. For vagina billet. For to have communication with women giam. For buttocks sampud. For thigh paha. For knee tuhad. For shin basag. For calf of the leg bitus. For ankle balbal. For heel shiachid. For sole of the foot lapa. For gold baloan. For silver pilla. For brass concach. For iron button. For sugar cane tube. For spoon gondon. For rice bug haxparis. For honey degex. For wax talho. For salt asin. For wine tuba neonipa. For to drink minuncubal. For to eat macon. For hog bobby. For goat candin. For chicken monarch. For millet humas. For sorgo batit. For panicum dana. For pepper manissa. For cloves cayenne. For cinnamon mana. For ginger luya. For garlic lax una. For oranges exua. For egg silig. For coconut lubi. For vinegars luca. For water tubin. For fire clayo. For smoke asug. For to blow tig ban. For balances tin ban. For weight to hill. For pearl muashera. For mother of pearl tipe. For pipe a musical instrument sub in. For disease of st. Job aliapalan. Bring me pallet in Costa Rica. For certain rice cakes to nape. Good main. No title. For knife k pole, sundan. For scissors cattle. To shave chanthange. For a well-adorned man pakseo. For linen balandan. For the cloth with which they cover themselves Abaka. For hawk spell : For pater nosters of all classes tackle. For comb cutlery, Miss Amos. For to comb monsu good. For shirt sabun. For sewing needle dagu. For to sew mammas. For porcelain mobilic. For dog-gan, ito. For cat epos. For their scarf skipas. For glass beads balas. Come here America. For house ilaga, ballet. For timber tatamua. For the mats on which they sleep tajikan. For palm mats bani. For their leaf cushions ulaman. For wooden platters thilan. For their god Abba. For sun adlo. For moon songhad. For star bolan, bunthan. For dawn many. For morning yuma. For cup taga. Large basil. For bow bosup. For arrow aghan. For shields kalasan. For quilted garments used for fighting baludi. For their daggers kalix. Baladio. For their cutlasses camp elan. For spear bankan. For like tuan. For figs i.e., bananas sigin. For gourds baghin. For the chords of their violins got sap. For river tau. For fishing net pukit, le. For small boat sampan. For large canes kaugan. For the small ones bonbon. For their large boats balangay. For their small boats bolodo. For crabs Cuban. For fish ikum, isida. For a fish that is all colored panisipan. For another red fish timuan. For a certain other kind of fish palax. For another kind of fish imaluan. All the same siama. For a slave bonsal. For gallows ball. For ship baneo. For a king or captain general raya. Numbers: 1 ua, 2 dua, 3 tolo, 4 upat, 5 lima, 6 anam, 7 pito, 8 guilu, 9 chum, 10 polo. In the midst of that archipelago, at a distance of 18 leguas from that island of Cebu, at the head of the other island called Boal, we burned the ship Concept Ione, for too few men of us were left to work it. We stowed the best of its contents in the other 2 ships, and laid our course toward the south-southwest, coasting along the island called Panalongan, where black men like those in Ethiopia live. Then we came to a large island Mindanao, whose king, in order to make peace with us, drew blood from his left hand, marking his body, face, and the tip of his tongue with it as a token of the closest friendship, and we did the same. I went ashore alone with the king in order to see that island. We had no sooner entered a river than many fishermen offered fish to the king. Then the king removed the cloths which covered his privies, as did some of his chiefs, and began to row while singing past many dwellings which were upon the river. 2 hours after nightfall we reached the king's house. The distance from the beginning of the river where our ships were to the king's house, was 2 leguas. When we entered the house, we came upon many torches of cane and palm leaves, which were of the anime, of which mention was made above. Until the supper was brought in, the king with 2 of his chiefs and 2 of his beautiful women drank the contents of a large jar of palm wine without eating anything. I, excusing myself as I had supped, would only drink but once. In drinking they observed all the same ceremonies that the king of Maza did. Then the supper, which consisted of rice and very salt fish, and was contained in porcelain dishes, was brought in. They ate their rice as if it were bread, and cook it after the following manner. They first put in an earthen jar like our jars, a large leaf which lines all of the jar. Then they add the water and the rice, and after covering it allow it to boil until the rice becomes as hard as bread, when it is taken out in pieces. Rice is cooked in the same way throughout those districts. When we had eaten, the king had a reed mat and another of palm leaves, and a leaf pillow brought in so that I might sleep on them. The king and his 2 women went to sleep in a separate place, while I slept with one of his chiefs. When day came and until the dinner was brought in, I walked about that island. I saw many articles of gold in those houses but little food. After that we dined on rice and fish, and at the conclusion of dinner, I asked the king by signs whether I could see the queen. He replied that he was willing, and we went together to the summit of a lofty hill, where the queen's house was located. When I entered the house, I made a bow to the queen, and she did the same to me, whereupon I sat down beside her. She was making a sleeping mat of palm leaves. In the house there was hanging a number of porcelain jars and 4 metal gongs, one of which was larger than the second, while the other 2 were still smaller for playing upon. There were many male and female slaves who served her. Those houses are constructed like those already mentioned. Having taken our leave, we returned to the king's house, where the king had us immediately served with refreshments of sugar cane. The most abundant product of that island is gold. They showed me certain large valleys, making me a sign that the gold there was as abundant as the hairs of their heads, but they have no iron with which to dig it, and they do not dare to go to the trouble to get it. That part of the island belongs to the same land as Butuan and Calagan, and lies toward Boal, and is bounded by Mazaa. As we shall return to that island again, I shall say nothing further now. The afternoon having waned, I desired to return to the ships. The king and the other chief men wished to accompany me, and therefore we went in the same balangai. As we were returning along the river, I saw, on the summit of a hill at the right, 3 men suspended from one tree, the branches of which had been cut away. I asked the king what was the reason for that, and he replied that they were malefactors and robbers. Those people go naked as do the others above mentioned. The king's name is Raya Kalaneo. The harbor is an excellent one. Rice, ginger, swine, goats, fowls, and other things are to be found there. That port lies in a latitude of 8 degrees toward the Arctic Pole, and in a longitude of 167 degrees from the line of demarcation. It is 50 leguas from Zubu, and is called Chipet. 2 days' journey thence to the northwest is found a large island called Lawson, where 6 or 8 junks belonging to the Liquian people go yearly. Leaving there and laying our course west-southwest, we cast anchor at an island not very large and almost uninhabited. The people of that island are Moros and were banished from an island called Bern. They go naked as do the others. They have blowpipes and small quivers at their side, full of arrows and a poisonous herb. They have daggers whose hafts are adorned with gold and precious gems, spears, bucklers, and small cuirasses of buffalo horn. They called us holy beings. Little food was to be found in that island, but there were immense trees. It lies in a latitude of 7½ degrees toward the Arctic Pole, and is 43 leguas from Chipet. Its name is Cagayan. About 25 leguas to the west-northwest from the above island we found a large island, where rice, ginger, swine, goats, fowls, figs 1/2 braza long and as thick as the arm, i.e., bananas, they are excellent, and certain others are 1 palmo and less in length, and are much better than all the others. Coconuts, camotes batate, sugar cane, and roots resembling turnips in taste, are found. Rice is cooked there under the fire in bamboos or in wood, and it lasts better than that cooked in earthen pots. We called that land the land of promise, because we suffered great hunger before we found it. We were often on the point of abandoning the ships and going ashore in order that we might not die of hunger. The king made peace with us by gashing himself slightly in the breast with one of our knives, and upon bleeding, touching the tip of his tongue and his forehead in token of the truest peace, and we did the same. That island lies in a latitude of 9⅓ degrees toward the Arctic Pole, and a longitude of 171⅓ degrees from the line of demarcation. It is called Puloan. Those people of Puloan go naked as do the others. Almost all of them cultivate their fields. They have blowpipes with thick wooden arrows more than 1 palmo long, with harpoon points, and others tipped with fish bones, and poisoned with an herb, while others are tipped with points of bamboo like harpoons and are poisoned. At the end of the arrow they attach a little piece of soft wood, instead of feathers. At the end of their blowpipes they fasten a bit of iron like a spearhead, and when they have shot all their arrows they fight with that. They place a value on brass rings and chains, bells, knives, and still more on copper wire for binding their fishhooks. They have large and very tame cocks, which they do not eat because of a certain veneration that they have for them. Sometimes they make them fight with one another, and each one puts up a certain amount on his cock, and the prize goes to him whose cock is the victor. They have distilled rice wine which is stronger and better than that made from the palm.